Welcome to Thinking Like a Lawyer with your hosts Ellie Mistal and Joe Patrice, talking about legal news and pop culture, all while thinking like a lawyer. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law, and once again, my co-host here, physically in the room with me, is Ellie Mistal, and fully dressed.
On a previous podcast, I made a request that somebody sponsor the podcast and send me a trench coat. My family who listened was very unhappy with that and wanted me to assure all of our listeners that I am fully capable of buying my own coats.
Oh, yeah.
And I do not need the charity of others to dress myself. So there you go, my sister.
Yeah, I don't think, I certainly didn't get that impression. I thought the impression that was that you expose yourself and you need a trench coat. I thought that was what we were going for, but...
I mean, so did I, quite frankly, and I was surprised to get the pushback that I did, but there you go. I am capable of being clothed.
And we always want to make sure that everyone gets the exact right impression about your state of dress, which is currently, though it not always is, but currently fully clothed.
Yay.
Yeah. So, so today we're...
This week I feel like you wanted to grind some gears a little bit more even than I did. Right?
It's kind of it's less of a grinding gears. I just think that a story came up this week that is hilarious and has legal overtones, and we didn't really write much about it on Above the Law, but we wanted to kind of chat about it because I do think this is kind of fascinating, from an IP situation. So Time Magazine has reportedly sent a cease and desist letter to Donald Trump over the fact that he puts up in his golf courses this framed cover of Time Magazine talking about how great he is when he was on the cover of Time Magazine. The only problem is that it's a entirely fake cover that was doctored up, photoshopped up to make it look like he was on the cover of Time Magazine.
It's literally fake news.
It is in fact fake news, yes. And they've requested that he take it down, and it got me thinking, like, what's the claims here? Like, what's going on?
I don't see where it is, because I remember, you go to the boardwalk and they have a thing where you put your head in the cardboard cutout, and then somebody prints out a Time Person of the Year kind of mock-up for you. I feel like this is a service maybe not directly offered by the magazine, but like I definitely have seen people with fake Person of the Year cover shoots of them, and everybody knows it's fake and it's fun and whatever. It's only Trump who apparently it's only the kind of mouth-breathing idiots that go to Trump golf courses at this point who might look at that and think it was real. But I think, up here amongst us Illuminati, I think it's well established that sometimes Time Magazine covers are fake.
Yeah, I mean, that said, they shouldn't be, right? I mean, there's a reason it's on a boardwalk that you get that, in the same way that you can get knockoff Gucci's down on Canal Street. That's not that's okay. And the
small business, yeah.
Yeah, well, the small business stealing intellectual property, yeah. The problem I have, I didn't quite understand what the claim against Trump himself would be, because whoever is doing the business of putting fake Time Magazine covers out there, they are violating the trademark and potentially the copyright of Time Magazine. Copyright Times font, and it's a fairly generic one, so it may not be copyrightable, but it's definitely a trademark, and there's some claim against the person who's doing it, and there's some dilution, maybe claim of making them Time Magazine look like it's not a real news site that just does advertorial for billionaires. And there might be some claim there, but those aren't against Trump, unless, of course, Trump is the person who ordered these fake things made. Then maybe there's that claim, but there's not that. But I talked to Professor Sprigman from NYU to just get an actual, deep dive on what the legal issues here might be, because the cease and desist letter isn't out. His sense was that it's an iffy claim, but that he thinks there might be a false endorsement claim here for Time, because the magazine cover basically says, look at this guy, he's a great guy, signed Time Magazine, when Time Magazine didn't really write it. And that sort of might be the basis for their claim. It's just interesting that as you pointed out, the fake news thing is being thrown around, and then here the literal only fake news is this, although not the only. There's actually another Time Magazine snafu, which was a few months ago, earlier in the term. There was a picture of him in the Oval Office, and there was a Time Magazine on the desk, and that Time Magazine was actually a doctored cover too.
Really?
Yeah, but a famous hoax. It was there was a right-wing Photoshop of an old cover that had a penguin and ice on it, and that's from the 70s, that said the coming ice age. And they use it to say, like, in the 70s, you thought it was an ice age, and now you're saying global warming. You don't know what you're doing. But that's not at all what that cover is. It's a fake.
Do you think Donald Trump has ever read a Time Magazine cover to cover? Like, ever in his entire life?
Oh, probably not. Oh, I mean, but who reads Time Magazine cover to cover?
I know, but like Trump's been around for a while.
I guess. I mean, I never really felt of Time Magazine as a cover-to-cover kind of publication. You know? I'll read like the story I'm interested in and move on. Like The Economist is a cover-to-cover.
So you definitely think that Trump has read a story in Time Magazine?
I mean, if his name was in it, I'm sure he did.
The whole story, you think?
Maybe.
Really? Which I would take that money.
Yeah.
That's a good segue, because I would take that money. I would give you.
There you go.
I would give you Trump never reading a full article in Time Magazine, minus 150.
Okay. All right. I mean, I just feel like he sues so many people for scurrilous, actually non-colorable claims of libel that he probably would. But well, that's fair. Well, that is a great segue. Good point. The segue is to guest we've had on a few times, Steve Silver from the Legal Blitz. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, so
Hey, Steve.
we've got Steve back because the last time we were talking, we were on a previous episode, we were talking about these New Jersey's continuing quixotic efforts to get sports gambling in the state, which is not allowed under federal law. And it's been litigated a few times, and they keep failing. But
People don't understand. A lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, Atlantic City, you can gamble in New Jersey. You can't gamble on sports in New Jersey, which New Jersey doesn't understand why that's so.
and on while everyone, as we were kind of talking, while everyone is concentrating on other things the Supreme Court did this week, the Supreme Court agreed to take that case. So we're going to get a definitive answer coming up.
Yeah. So Steve, let's set that up. So this Monday, the Supreme Court, this week, sorry, I don't know when people are listening. At the end of the term, the Supreme Court decided to take a number of new cases. They decided to take the travel ban case. People are very interested in that. They decided to take Masterpiece Cake Shop case, which is about religious freedom or gay rights, depending on how you slice it. But that wasn't the one that you noticed. So tell us what else the court took.
Right, and it actually wasn't the same day. It came out in their cleanup order, so to speak, on Tuesday. So all the headlines are breaking about these major cases they're going to take, and us who care about sports betting or sports in general, we're kind of left hanging. And sure enough, cert was granted. So there's two cases that are consolidated into one, and it's, I think, important that the case titles are actually important, because the one is New Jersey Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association versus the NCAA, and the other is Christie, as in Chris Christie, versus the NCAA. So they're consolidated cases, same issues, but that Chris Christie in the title one is pretty interesting considering his ties with the Trump administration, and how the Solicitor General acted. So the drilled down short version is New Jersey thinks that PASPA, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, is unconstitutional, and they want legal sports betting. And the court's essentially going to decide, is that law, which we're approaching on almost 30 years of it being on the books, is that unconstitutional?
Now, hasn't New Jersey kind of litigated this before and lost and kept losing? I mean, New Jersey is like the Mets on this issue.
Right. We're going on 6 years now of litigation. So if you're listening from New Jersey, I guess part of your tax dollars have been funding this for quite a while at this point, in the governor's quest. But this actually started because the voters approved it in New Jersey. The voters voted with an overwhelming majority to, in a sense, legalize sports betting. It's not as simple as that, but that's what they voted for, and so it went to the state legislature. They created the laws and the regulations that, it would be limited to the horse tracks and the casinos, and created the whole regulatory scheme to have sports betting because their voters wanted it, their citizens wanted it.
Can you explain how this PASPA? Do you explain how it prevents New Jersey and, as you're pointing out, New Jersey voters from having the sports gambling that they so richly deserve?
Right. So New Jersey, I think it's also important that for people to know that New Jersey had a chance to have legal sports betting back in the 90s. So PASPA grandfathered in, which is why Nevada has sports betting, certain states. So, Nevada said, okay, we're going to have sports betting. Delaware was allowed to have a version of parlay cards because that's what they had on the books. And New Jersey could have had sports betting.
Yeah.
Parlay cards, really?
Yeah.
In Delaware?
Oh, yeah.
Dude. All right. Sorry. Go on.
Ellie just left the recording studio on his way to Delaware.
I'm heading to Wilmington.
Right, yeah. You just got to keep going down 95 a little more. And, I used to go down there when I was living in Philadelphia. But you've got to pick 3 or more events, so to speak. And so the theory is that you're no longer, in a sense, gambling. You're using more skill because you're picking 3 or more outcomes. But yes, you can have limited sports betting in Delaware. And this is all because of PASPA. And so the key language, and it's a pretty short passage, is that it's unlawful for a governmental entity to sponsor, operate, advertise, promote, license, or authorize. And then it goes on. Lottery, sweepstakes, betting, gambling, anything involving sport. Now, I've always argued, and a number of others have, that we have daily fantasy sports everywhere we look. How does that not violate PASPA? And there are some fantasy sports cards out. But at the end of the day, New Jersey couldn't get their act together in the 90s. PASPA goes into effect. New Jersey never was able to pass the law to actually create the regulatory scheme for sports betting. And now we have Nevada, cashing in, and New Jersey with Atlantic City on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, it definitely seems like this is, while there was a whole procedure, today this operates largely as Nevada's very powerful politicians getting their kind of kickback because they are preventing any discussion really of, hey, maybe we should let New Jersey in on this.
Well, I don't know if that's the case because at this point there's only a few companies operating in Nevada, and almost all of them have properties in Atlantic City, so they would want the additional revenue. The internet company,
although with the tour, well, I'm thinking more the tourist folks. Like if I'm Harry Reid, for instance, people have to come to me and spend dollars in Nevada, so long as it's the only game in town, so to speak.
Well, so it's interesting you bring that up because,
okay,
in fact, we know Nevada. You go to Vegas, we've got the sports books, great time. Only a very small percent, it's less than 5%, maybe it's about 2 or 3% of all sports bets in America take place in Nevada. So the people who are betting are betting. There's just the money's going offshore, or it's going to the neighborhood bookie, or it's going between friends. So we know. And
so it's not the legislative mafia; it's the actual frickin' mafia that is blocking legislation on this.
Right, and so and when I've written for Above the Law or other sites that I always usually throw in a line about the bookies because they're the ones who truly stand to lose the most from this. But you bring up mafia, and I'd like to use another word, which is cartel. The cartel that's blocking this is the NCAA and, to some extent, the NFL and the other pro leagues. And it's something that I think most people are shocked when I tell them, and they don't realize that PASPA specifically grants those sports leagues the same power as the U.S. Attorney General to shut down sports betting. And in these 6 years of litigation, up until the Solicitor General was asked to give his opinion, the federal government has been silent. They are not the ones involved here, and the feds are not the ones trying to shut down what New Jersey's doing.
Explain why the leagues want that, because I mean, I think so many people understand that the NCAA benefits when people bet on the tournament, and National Football League benefits when people are betting on the games on Sunday. So explain why the leagues want to officially, formally limit gambling to just one state.
Sure. So, and again, remember, this started 6 years ago. And at that point, we didn't have an NHL team in Vegas. We didn't have an NFL team in Vegas. And we had daily fantasy sports, but not to the extent that everyone now knows about DraftKings and FanDuel, and that most of these pro sports franchises have invested heavily in. So the whole landscape has changed. But the party line, to answer your question, the party line would be integrity of the game. You hear integrity of the game thrown out left and right. But that's
Pete
nonsense
Rose,
at this
oh
point.
no!
I mean, they're
Right.
they're just about the student athletes. You know that, right? Yeah. They're
Right.
just
So-
really about the classes.
Well, and so the real reason behind that is money. If you had a way that sports betting would give the NFL extra revenue tomorrow, we'd already have legal sports betting. And I mean extra direct revenue. They're very well aware that their ratings on Thursday night blowout games are almost exclusively from people who have money on the game. The leagues
Yeah,
know
there's
this.
no other reason.
The leagues know this. That's why they have injury reports. I mean, truthfully, that is why injury reports exist, and there are rules. Now, granted, Bill Belichick won't always go into detail, and hockey gives generic lower body injury reports, but that's why. It's for the bettors.
Yeah.
That's why every pregame show talks about point spread and favorite. There's a massive amount of people gambling massive amounts of money. We're just not taxing it or regulating it. And so the integrity of the game argument from the NCAA standpoint is nonsense, because you can't bet on UNLV games in Vegas anyway. And the New Jersey has already said they would, for any events taking place in the state, it would be pulled off the board. And
So
if
you don't get to
had
bet on the Giants and Jets.
Well, no, just the NCAA.
Oh,
So not-
okay. I
no-
see,
You don't
I
get
see,
to
I
bet
see.
on Rutgers.
So you don't get to bet on Rutgers. Well, that's good. That I can't imagine there's a spread big enough for Rutgers losing. So that makes
Well,
sense.
right. Or let's say the NCAA were to hold a champion, a tournament event in New Jersey. They could pull those games off the board. That's already been done for decades in Vegas. For the other leagues, you already have Major League Baseball, the NBA, the commissioner saying, yeah, we're going to revisit this. We're in favor of maybe redoing the legislation. And the NFL at this point, what can they say? They're putting a team in Las Vegas. How can they possibly say that the evils of gambling is somehow going to ruin the game? And I think the counter is, in my experience of living and reporting in Las Vegas, is that you want the money tracked. You want the bets being placed at a sports book, because there are ways in a lot of computer systems that are already in place internationally that can track unusual bets or swings of the line that might be signals that there's something nefarious going on. But you lose that ability if they're under the table. So
Yeah.
That's what
really
they do in Britain with the EPL, with the English
Sure.
Premier League. So
and
Well, we
and
kind
every
of-
now and then, you hear about issues, whether it's with soccer or with tennis, where people are, throwing matches or whatever it is. And the reason we know that is because we know what the bets are, and we can see how the lines move.
Mhm.
But we don't know that if all these things are taking place under the table.
So you've made a compelling case for why the leagues might be interested in allowing legislation to be changed here. But let's also talk about the legal angle at court. How was PASPA ever something that seemed like it passed muster under the 10th Amendment? And I know, as a liberal, I just said the 10th Amendment like it was a good thing. Lord forgive me, but like it's there, and it has to. If it's going to have any meaning, doesn't it have to have meaning for a case like this?
Well, that's going to be the heart of the argument, and the court has mentioned PASPA kind of in passing in a few opinions, and actually, if some of the listeners might remember the Shelby County case. Roberts wrote the opinion on that, right? So, I know you two do, but in the Shelby County case, Ginsburg actually talked about PASPA in the dissent, as an example of, the statutes that treat states differently. That is this safe? So is something like PASPA safe? Given the expansion of this, the notion of this equal sovereignty. And so that theme, I think, is going to come up here. You're going to talk about, commandeering the state's powers and a lot of 10th Amendment arguments. It's ripe with just people, if you're interested in constitutional law, this case is ripe with them. And I think it will really tell us a lot about, where the justices are on the spectrum and really how Gorsuch is going to continue to rule. Because you would think this is right up the states' rights, we need to limit the big bad federal government type of argument.
It strikes me as though the 10th, how they come about getting an answer on this is going to be interesting, because I think there are a few ways you could resolve this case, but I think there's a lot, like you said, we're going to learn a lot about the spectrum, because I got to assume the conservative justices are very interested in making this a 10th Amendment case. Federal government shouldn't be telling states what to do with their gambling regulations. Whereas there's the other argument that is, sure, the federal government could pass a law banning gambling if they wanted to, but you could say the federal government doesn't get the right to say, except for Nevada, that there's an argument that the disparate impact is the issue, which is kind of what Ginsburg was talking about with the Voting Rights Act. But how this gets resolved and what it means for other stuff, marijuana laws, voting rights, etc., is going to be interesting.
I also think it's going to be interesting to see how they're, especially for the conservatives, being put in a box a little bit here in terms of some of the kind of social culture war issues versus some of these state rights issues, right? Like I kind of agree with what you guys have said, that it seems like this should be a slam dunk case for a guy like Gorsuch to get the federal government off your backs. But I also can see a guy like Gorsuch saying, oh goodness, no, we can't have this gambling in this establishment. Like, I mean, that does put them culturally in a bit of a bind, because for whatever reason we still tend to treat gambling as, like a major vice.
Almost as bad as dancing.
Almost as bad as dancing.
Well, that's exactly right. And, I've been sitting here before I came on today trying to figure out, how would each justice come down? And it's extremely hard to predict. You also have these, if you're going to adhere to the text of the law and, not undo what Congress wanted, does it just remain in place? But I tend to think, when you look at the history of this case, where New Jersey has lost twice at the Third Circuit, one including a hearing in front of the entire circuit, they lost 10-2. So you've got a clear law. The court asked for the views of the Solicitor General, who says you shouldn't take the case, and they ignore them, which they don't often do. The court usually, I think it's 80% of the time, does what the Solicitor General says. So there's at least 4 justices, we know that, who are very interested in this case, and maybe interested in a way of, getting rid of PASPA. The question is, are there 5? And who's that for? So I believe, I would think they didn't take this case just to affirm the Third Circuit.
Yeah, that would seem ridiculous. right? Like, what's the point?
It feels. I mean, again, we're kind of tea leaf reading here, but it feels to me like Roberts is going to be your swing here more than anybody, right? Because I Alito, Thomas, Gorsuch, let's put them all in the super state rights bucket. Kennedy, this actually seems like a kind of 10th Amendment thing that Kennedy would go for. Roberts, right, is the one who has to balance his kind of state right BS with his, Congress duly passed this law. I mean, it's not like you can make the arguments that Congress didn't know what it was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, you can always make the argument that Congress didn't know what it was doing. But I mean, this is a clearly passed law of Congress that they've had the legislators had ample opportunity to change it if they want to. And then especially with what you're reporting, Steve, in terms of how the leagues themselves might be gearing up to change legislation, from a Roberts perspective, changing these kinds of things legislatively is always preferable to changing them from the bench. So it really is going to be, I would imagine that he's your swing.
Well, that could be, but then you also have his, you have his Shelby County opinion,
right.
which, that's his hallmark of the, equal sovereignty. And so what do we do about that? What do we do when some states can, do something and some can't? It's a really tricky, interesting case. We also have some, major heavyweights who are going to argue it. It's going to be Ted Olson versus Paul Clement.
Really?
Yeah. So
Ted Olson versus.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm not looking forward to handicapping this for my fantasy SCOTUS league, which I am in fact in. And if no one listening is in it, by all means, you should join the fantasy SCOTUS league because it's kind of a fun way of legal nerding your day and gambling. It's not really gambling. There's, occasionally there's a sponsor that awards like a Starbucks card to the top 10% of at the end of the year or something like that. It's nothing really much, and it doesn't cost you money, so it's more of a giveaway. But
it's not SCOTUS FanDuel.
Yeah, but it's fun. You should try it. It was a lot of fun when there were only 8 justices. Made it a little bit more difficult.
Right.
All right.
Well, I also wonder, and you guys maybe follow the court a little more closely, is to what extent does the court, how do they treat the Solicitor General? This is the same guy traveling around the country defending the travel ban. So, how do they view his opinion? And as part of this, that they kind of saw him flip-flop, from what we call Christie 1 and Christie 2, and that maybe they just don't respect the administration's views as much as they used to.
Yeah, no, I think whether or not Jeffrey B. Wall has any credibility, I think we have to wait to see really how they treat him in the travel ban litigation. It will be interesting on your point just to see the level of respect he is accorded while he is arguing this. Will it be the same as what Don Verrilli got or Elena Kagan got? I don't know. Because the lower courts have been straight up, the lower courts have not extended Wall any court.
Department of Justice at all. Yeah.
So we'll see.
Right, and you also have think another interesting footnote is Trump was an avid sports betting supporter when he owned a casino in Atlantic City, and was very vocal about that. But now his administration is taking the position that we shouldn't have it, and Sessions has come out and saying gambling is like dancing and it's the devil's work.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? This is a hot case, and I think it's a lot of issues.
I think this comes to what I've long surmised may be an internal issue with the administration until Fox News mentions during Fox and Friends that Sessions has taken that stance. Trump may not even understand that that's what happened. So I'm interested in when they mention the administration wants to ban gambling in Atlantic City, because I could imagine the administration's feelings changing probably via tweet within about 10 minutes of that.
Honestly, I mean, it sounds like you're joking, but you're not. I mean, I think that you would be foolish at this point to think that Trump even knows this case is happening, has any idea what his administration's position is on the issue, and does not know where he is supposed to stand on this vis-a-vis his various constituencies. So again, like, it's sad, but you really aren't joking when you say that we don't actually know what Trump's position will be on this until somebody on the TV tells him that this is an issue. That's our country.
If that's true, it's also very sad for Chris Christie, who has,
You mean
this is
Governor
about
Reek?
the only thing he has left, and clearly Trump and his administration just aren't listening to him or don't care.
Governor Reek has a long game, and I don't think that it's played out yet. Governor Reek absolutely thinks that Sessions is going to resign or be forced out, or there's going to be some kind of fallout. Governor Reek still thinks that he will eventually be the 85th United States Attorney General.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Was he ever a prosecutor? He never talks about that. I guess maybe he was. Yeah, no. This was this is an interesting case. We're gonna be monitoring it going forward. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us again and walking us through this again. Because, we're all big gamblers. So I actually gonna go to Vegas in the near future. So I need to brush up on my sports bets.
I'm so pissed about that. So
you're pissed that I'm going. You're not pissed that you're not going. You're actually more pissed that I'm going.
No, I'm pissed. So ILTA, the big legal tech conference that I'm sure some of our listeners will be at. They have their conference in two places. We have one in DC, and then they flip and they go to Vegas, and they go back to DC, and they go to Vegas. That's just what they do. And so I was forced to go to ILTA last year when it was in DC. And, I went and I enjoyed it. But now that it's in Vegas, we're only going to send one person as opposed to two. And so Joe drew the short ILTA. Aren't you going to be like in Ireland though the week before?
Atlanta, but it's like Ireland.
It's like Ireland with black
it's
people.
Also an island that sinks into the ocean. That's not Atlanta. Yeah, no, so I'll be out there. If any Vegas listeners are around during ILTA, maybe we'll see if we can get something going. But yeah, no. So this is all a long way to say that I want to gamble, and I'm gonna ask for tips from you and Steve. So that's all I got. All right, but thanks again for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening. If you aren't already subscribed to the podcast via whatever method of subscribing you use, you should. That way you'll get every episode. There's the Legal Talk Network app that also allows you to listen to this show and other shows. You should read Above the Law. You should tell more people about reading Above the Law because it's fun and we're mildly entertaining people. You should follow us on Twitter. I'm at Joseph Patrice. He's at LENYC. We tweet relatively interesting stuff back and forth. And
if you have a case, especially a Supreme Court or federal appellate case that you think we should be focused on, don't assume that we've saw it already. Because
that one was slipped under our radar. Also, if you have questions ranging from, and we've gotten several serious ones about our decision podcast about making decision about law schools. We might have to do another episode on some of those, even though it may not help the people actually asking those questions because it might be too late. Could be useful for others. We may do one of those in the future. But don't just limit the questions you email at, I'm Joe at Above the Law, and he's Ellie at Above the Law, ELIE. Email us those questions, any other things you kind of are interested about with the podcast. We'll read them on air in a mailbag episode, or maybe they'll inspire a new episode, and they can be ridiculous. I mean, one of my favorite football podcasts in the off season has been doing podcasts where they're like, what's the best grocery store? And they just argue about it. We can do ridiculous stuff because that's the whole point of thinking like a lawyer. We would probably have some weird insights into grocery stores that would be very steeped in civil procedure, I'm sure. But do all that sort of stuff. Let us know. Listen to everything, blah, blah, blah. Give us ratings and reviews on those subscription services that you have for the podcast. That helps us get more stuff. And that's it, I think.
You guys have a nice one.
Great. Thanks.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. You can also find us at AboveTheLaw.com, ATLRedline.com, iTunes, RSS, Twitter, and Facebook. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.